What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Vicktory Life Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, owner, and founder of Vicktory Life, Dwight Vick, along here with my co-host, Danny Nokes. How you doing, my guy?
I'm doing good, brother. Hey, it was good to see you in person a couple weekends ago down in Blacksburg at the spring game. Man, what a fun weekend that was, wasn't it?
Oh, God is good, man. It wasn't even enough time, man. I mean, we had a great time talking. Man, I just, you my dude, man. You my brother. Just hanging out outside Lane Stadium. Me, you, Shanice, everybody, man. I wish I could have hung out longer. When we had a good time talking, but Um, it's so hard when I get back in town. I went down Thursday, Danny, and I still didn't see everybody I wanted to, man. So it's like, but at least I saw you. We got that nice dope picture that's floating around the internet, man. So it was good, man. It was good, man. Tech fans showed up and showed out.
Yeah. It was a fun weekend. It always is, and I'm the same way. I never feel like I get to see all the people that I want to see when you're only there. For me, it was one night. I didn't get to go down Friday like I had wanted and be a part of all the festivities, especially with the boys over from Sons of Saturday. They put on such a great thing every single year, man. But I got to see you. I got to see my guy Bailey Angle, who is
Mm.
a well-known Hokie and a well-known personality around Blacksburg. I actually ran into him at PK. So it was fun, man. I feel blessed, like you said, and it's always too fast a time that goes by when you're down there in Blacksburg, isn't it?
Yeah, man. I went to Sharky's, man, had some wings. I haven't been to Sharky's in a minute. It was actually my first time being back in Blacksburg since the last spring game. I didn't make it to any, I'm trying to think. I didn't make it to any home games last year. And I didn't even make it to any games, even on the road. I like to try to get to some road games. So I think this year I'm gonna try to get there for at least one or two home games because now my son will be at Fork Union. We talked about him last episode,
Yeah.
episode 26. So he's going to prep a year. He's only 17, turns 18 next weekend. He'll be in Birmingham, Alabama, but I only have one left in the house. My youngest, Lauren, aka Lolo, will be starting high school
Lolo,
next
yeah.
year. Yeah, Lolo. So, not that I'm gonna have a lot of free time because your job as a parent is never done. Like,
Sure.
got my oldest daughter at ODU. We got to smash them in football my birthday weekend. We played them on my birthday. She's going into her junior year after this weekend, going into her junior
Holy
year of
cow.
college. And then Isaiah, prep, man, he'll be playing in the elite prep league. So he'll be playing against Massanutten and Hargrave, um, a lot of the schools, man, North Carolina
Yeah.
schools and things like that. So I can see him in person, or I can watch him online, but I'm excited about that. And then the crazy thing about it is, man, I got a good feeling about this situation. I think some of the schools you and I talked about are going to follow up and circle the block, so to speak. So we'll see what
Yeah.
happens, right? But Tech was
Hey,
Tech was great, man.
it was. I'm surprised you got into Sharkies, man. I couldn't get in. The line was too long. It was halfway down Main Street, I
Oh
swear.
no, I'm a vet. I'm an OG. This is what you got to do. I went.
Yeah.
Remember, I'm older than you, man, so I know how this goes. Even back when I was in Tech in the early 2000s, after I was done, and I would come back when the program began to ascend. You got to go. Like I got down there Thursday night, so I went Friday afternoon, and it was like me and a lot of alumni. It wasn't packed. I couldn't go. You still young, you probably still get carded. You probably still get asked for your ID.
Every
I
now and
got
then.
great. I got gray in my bed, man. So they know, they know I'm an OG. So I go during the day, but it was worth the time. Went there with Shanice, the wifey, and we had some wings. And it was just good, man. The weather was great. It just was a great. It was for me. It was like a rejuvenation, man. I get a chance to go actually that Friday, and I apologize to my listeners if I sound congested. Up here in Northern Virginia, the pollen is on Thanos level right now. Pollen is disrespectful. It's all over my truck. As soon as I open the door, it's running up on me like this. Pollen is
Yep.
straight disrespectful. But um, I went on Friday morning. I got up and before we went to Sharkies, I just drove over to the stadium. Saw our boy Pearson, who was just on our podcast a few weeks ago.
That's
Saw
right.
him, JC, Coach Marv, Pry, you name it, Tyler Bowen. I was just trying to lay in the cut, and they called me on the field. It was kind of a walkthrough because they played Saturday. They're gonna be good. You probably saw my tweet. They got some. We're gonna have Andy Bitter on join us in a second. Andy Bitter of Techsideline used to be a part of the athletic Virginia Tech football beat writer, is going to join us. He's been on the show a few times with me and Danny, but um, it's just great because they got 3 defensive tackle transfers. Tech does, and it just seems like right now the portal is either hit or miss. You either can misuse it or you can use it to your advantage. It seems like Pride and staff are using the portal to their advantage, man.
Yeah. Well, and particularly you mentioned the defensive tackles, Dwight, Enos Peebles, Fubby, I believe, as he goes by, right?
Yeah,
Getting
yeah.
it's very encouraging to see him win this offseason award that he got, I think, at halftime of the spring game. But he was a
Mm-hmm.
guy that coming in, Tech fans knew he could make an immediate impact because he was good at Duke. I mean, he was a good player for the Blue Devils this
Yes,
past season and for a
yes.
couple seasons. So he's going to make an immediate impact, man. I can't wait to watch him play.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just crazy, man. Like, and we only going what? And help me out. I'm pretty sure I got this right. This is only going to be Pride's 3rd year.
Third year. Yeah, year three.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like the expectations have jumped, man. Like just a few years ago, we were like, oh, it was 3 wins. It was looking ugly. But I will say they earned them 3 wins. They could have had more.
Mm.
But when you look
Hmm.
back on that talent on the team, and you look at what they have now, it's night and day. They got a youngin, and I got to text my guy, Bruce Garnes, to get his name again. And Tyler Bourne told me about him as well. I can't remember this kid's name. I know we're doing a podcast. I should have my notes right here, but I'm not recording from the Vicktory Life office. So I'm here in my living room with the Celtics and Heat playing. Um, but I'm gonna tell you, there's gonna be a few surprises. I'm sure Andy, when he comes on, Andy's like an encyclopedia for Hokie fans. He's gonna get the name right. But
Yeah.
look at the talent they got coming back this year versus last year. I'm not last year, but 3 years ago is insane. Like it's just the expectations, man. Like I was asked, and again, I don't like doing predictions in April because a lot's going to happen. Not so much attrition or transfers or injuries, but just more so you just never know. But I just feel so good about this team because you look at the quarterback they have in Kyron. I spent a lot of time with his dad, Kevin. I spent like 3 or 4 hours with him up in the suite. I didn't even watch the second half of the Virginia Tech spring game because me and him and my wife and
Mm.
my cousin Mike Vick and Marcus, we were all chopping it up about Tech. And it's so funny because Marcus had no filter. Marcus was like, "Hey, yo, man, they telling us he leaving after the spring game, gonna take $1 million at LSU." And Kevin, dad,
Whoa.
Kevin, yeah, have you heard about that rumor?
No, I hadn't. Well, actually, I might have heard whispers of it.
Yeah, man. His dad was like, Marcus went right in. He ain't wait. He went in
Oh
like
man.
how 50 Cent did, and Kyron Drone's dad is a great guy. He's coached people. He's like, nah, man, he's locked in. He said I would feel bad if he left Blacksburg, especially with many of the guys on the offense he recruited to come play with him. So
Yeah.
it's so funny what you see on Twitter, and it's very reminiscent of I remember last summer, whoever started this rumor needs to get off the crystal meth. But there was a rumor started that my cousin Mike was going to be the head coach at Norfolk State, a football
Whoa.
coach.
Oh
And I'm
my
like,
goodness.
I ignored it. And people started tagging me. I'm like, y'all can't be serious, right? You can't be serious. So I literally I called Mike. He was golfing. It was like, man, nah, man. He's like, look, first of all, you would know before anybody because I would need you to come coach the offensive line. So I put that rumor to bed. But real quick, man, before Andy jumps on, man, like when you look at the spring game, and the spring game, Tyler Bourne told me on Friday, and I knew they're gonna keep it vanilla. But when you look at Virginia Tech and the landscape of the ACC, I know it's only April, but you look at what they have on offense and defense. A bunch of starters returning. They got depth. They hit gold in the transfer portal. I mean, what is your feeling around the program? What do you think?
It's very optimistic right now, buddy, and a lot more optimistic than it was going into last season, especially coming off of Pry's first year, which was a little bit rough. But some takeaways I had from the spring game, particularly, first was how about our guy PJ Prelo, Pearson's son, getting into the end zone a couple of different times, right? I mean, he looked great in the backfield.
I told Pilo, who I tongue with, I talked to Pearson Thursday night, Friday morning at practice, and I talked to Pearson. He was on our show with me, you, and Coach DJ, aka Coach Cheetah, and he mentioned nothing about his son being on offense now. Number two, he was boogieing with it. He was toting. I mean, he
He
looked
was.
like a natural, man. Like he scored a bunch of touchdowns and he can catch out the backfield. Oh my God, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's great to see, man. Cause I will say this, a lot of times we forget how good somebody's dad or mom was an athlete, but Pearson, to this
Hmm.
day, I know it's 2024, he still remains one of the best athletes to ever play at Virginia Tech. I mean, he had a 44, 45-inch vertical. You see how short he is, right?
Yeah. Right. He's like my yeah, he's like my
Yeah.
height. I remember sitting
So,
next to him for all those tailgate shows the couple years that we did. Yeah. So I was pumped to see PJ get in the end zone. That was really neat. But I think that also sort of was a theme throughout the day, Dwight. They were really finding creative ways to get their running backs the ball, no matter who was back there, whether it was
mhm.
Tootin or PJ or some of the other guys that they were rotating in and out. I really liked the way that they were using them. And I think that's a way that Tyler Bowen, the offensive coordinator, has, sort of switched up the offense in the last year or so. They're just finding different ways to get guys the ball, get guys in space and try and get them out there on the edge and make some moves, pick up some chunk yardage, which they did several times throughout that game. So, I think it goes along the same lines as what we saw in the second half of this past season too, where it was obviously night and day when Kyron Drones took over as the quarterback, but they also had to tailor the offense toward him. So that and Pop Watson, I liked the way that he looked on Saturday at the spring on the Saturday of the spring game. Now it being a couple of weeks later, but I think he's more similar to Kyron Drones than some of the other guys that they've had behind him in the past too. So
Hey,
I'm encouraged, man. They got some talent at wide receiver too that I feel like they didn't unleash yet, and they're just waiting for that this fall.
well, I saw one catch was my guy Lane. We talk so much
Yeah, yeah,
about
Jalen Lane.
Jalen Lane, man. Like he caught one in the middle. And the great thing about when you had the spring game, the first half, or at least the first quarter into the early in the second quarter, I'm standing with Lauren Johnson, Anthony Midget, who is the assistant defensive back coach with the Steelers. Did I
Mm,
say Corey Moore? I mean, so many guys I can name drop. We're all there watching as fans and alumni. And you can see us getting excited, and we're talking about that kid. And we all talked about Lane as one of those guys. He can boogie with the ball, like he has those shakes. And I talked to Tyler Boone. I'm giving all our listeners on Spotify, or if you're listening or watching right now when we run this, Tyler Bowen told me straight up, this is really great for him because he's got weapons, and the guys are now familiar with the offense. So you got Tootin, you got Drones, the quarterback, who I said before anybody's now taking my thunder was going to be a Heisman candidate. I said that. I was trying to wait till the season, but then somebody heard me on something. Now everybody wants to take my style. But for real though, I mean, he's got weapons. Ali Jennings was
yeah.
coming back off the injury, who I saw looks great.
Yep.
It's going to be. I mean, Tootin last year returned 2 kickoffs for touchdowns, was a big
Yeah.
time threat in the screen game, and out the backfield or even off the edge. It's crazy. It's hard not to get excited, right? And it's
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
man, because I think a few years ago, man, we were playing with Legos out there, man, trying to build cathedrals. We were out we
That's
were
funny. I
it
love
was
that.
lean. It was lean out there, man. Danny, it was tough, man. I mean, it was hard,
What's
you know.
what's funny is you mentioned Ollie Jennings. I think he drew Mansour Delane on a good bit of his time on the field in that spring game, and that's another strength I think at the Virginia Tech defense will be at defensive back, particularly at corner. That was one of the things that Coach Cheetah was telling us in the last episode.
Yeah, man. No, he did. Again, it's going to be interesting. But before we finish running our mouth, we got somebody that is there all the time covering Tech. We're joined by my guy, who I probably appeared on his stuff 15, 16 times, going back to when he was writing for Roanoke and Techsideline. I mean, and the Athletic. Now we're joined by Techsideline's Andy Bitter joins us, and Danny Nokes and I, man. Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm 1/30th of the way to paying off my debt to you in terms of returning the favor with interviews.
No, man, it's all
I'll
good,
get there
man.
someday. I'll get there
No,
someday.
it's funny. I got the article you did. You guys can't see it because I'm in the middle level of my house, but in the basement, I got you get older, you start to appreciate any time somebody wants to talk to you. One of the articles I have framed in the basement, Andy, is the one you did with me, Mike, and Marcus. It's still one of my favorite articles. We talk about our time playing West Virginia and the Morgantown rivalry, man. And I wish we could renew that rivalry. I know that's a topic for a different pod, but that article is still very special to me because only thing we couldn't get was Marcus, and Marcus is so low key. And then I'm talking to him up in the suite in the second half of the spring game, and he's like, "When you gonna get me on, man? Come on, cuz." I'm like, "When you gonna get on?" He was like, "I'll get on with you," but no, that's a real special article to me, Andy. I really appreciate it, man.
I enjoyed that one. Yeah, if
Yeah,
we could have gotten Marcus, that would have been the cherry on top to that. But you and
yeah.
Mike were pretty good anyway. The Vicks had a lot of stories about West Virginia. I liked it.
Yeah, man, West Virginia. I don't know if it's the same. I mean, I didn't. Did either one of y'all go when they came to Lane Stadium a few years ago, or did either one of y'all go when we went to Morgantown? We lost on the goal line.
Yep, I
Did
was at
you?
both those games. Really
So
good
I
crowd.
was
yeah,
right.
was it
I was at
intense
the one at
though?
FedEx Field.
Oh yeah, you went to the one at FedEx. I didn't go. I went to the three previous ones at FedEx, and I told you. I think we might have recorded. I
The
said I will
curse.
never go back until that curse is broken. I wasn't going back until that
Yeah.
curse was broken. I couldn't do it, Danny, but you were there,
Yeah.
Andy, in Morgantown and in Lane.
And FedEx. Yep, all three of those games. I thought the crowd was great. It was like you could tell that the rivalry had been missed for a while because I think the fans were really into it. I think West Virginia fans took great pleasure in beating Virginia Tech there at the goal line at the end. And yeah, I wasn't out there in the crowd or anything like that, so I don't know if there was any bad behavior. I thought it was just a great crowd, really energetic
Mhm.
crowd into it. I think they really wanted to beat Virginia Tech and vice versa. And that's all you can ask for in a college football rivalry. I think they should play that game more often.
They gotta, I don't know, they gotta figure it out, man. I'm glad they got East Carolina off the schedule. God, I was probably leading the petition for that one. I hated playing them every year. It got to the point, and East Carolina fans used to get mad at me on Twitter. It was nothing against East Carolina. They recruited me back in the day. I loved that school, loved their program, but it was like we were scheduled to play them forever. And then they switched it off, and now we got ODU, to what, 2038 or something?
Yeah, that there's no way that's going to last that long. I bet you they get out of that eventually.
Please.
Just for the variety. That I mean that you've played enough of that. It's an
Oh,
absolute
please.
disaster every time you go down to Norfolk. I mean,
Oh,
something terrible
hopefully,
happens. Awful,
hopefully
awful
we
upset. Josh Jackson breaks his leg.
oh,
Trayvon Hill kicked off the team.
oh,
Locker room burglarized. I mean, just
oh.
whatever can go wrong has gone wrong on those
Stuck
trips
in the
down there.
elevator, stuck
Stuck
in
in
the elevator.
the oh, that's right. I forgot the
Yeah,
coaches got stuck in the elevator. Two losses,
Oh
yeah,
by the
my
way.
God.
I mean, it's probably the
yeah.
worst part of those two trips. But yeah, it's if they go down there and lose this year, just cancel the rest of the series. Do not just refuse to go back there anymore and be like, whatever the money takes to get out of it, we're just not doing it.
Real quick before we jump into recapping the spring game and looking forward to this season. I don't even know like how was they went to a bowl game last year, right? ODU did. They snuck into a bowl, kind of like we did, right?
Uh, I am not remembering, honestly.
Okay. Well, why you check, or if you check, that's fine either way. But are they supposed to be better this year? I know we have all these expectations, but are they supposed to be better?
Let's see. Last year they did. They went to the famous Toastery Bowl
Yeah, I
against
thought they
Western
did.
Kentucky. Lost it
Yeah,
38-35 in overtime. I think they blew a
yeah,
big lead in that game, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, they were up big in that game and lost it. I honestly I have not looked at their roster or anything like that. I feel like those FCS teams, everything is sort of in limbo, even once you get to the spring period. Like sometimes they have a really good player that's like, maybe I've played myself into the next tax bracket here. It might be worth, trying going out there on the transfer market. So we'll see. I mean, whatever it is, I think Virginia Tech is going to be a team that's going to be favored to beat them by uh, at least 10 points. I would think going into
I
that
would
game.
think,
I don't know what
man.
kind of initial line is, but with the history in that stadium, I don't know if that's the safest bet at that point.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into a few weeks ago, man. I didn't get a chance to see you, Andy. I feel like I saw everybody else, at least for a few minutes here and there. It was a lot of it is. I was telling Danny before you jumped on. I'm sure we all follow each other on Twitter. You've seen my tweets, my interviews. the energy and the culture around the Bird now with Pride and JC and Gavea Winslow and Xavier DB and Pearson, it's just night and day. And you throw in Marv and Coach Cheetah, who is as personal as anybody. It's a great feeling. And the great thing is, and I said this, on radio show, actually Andy and I, shameless plug, when you this runs tomorrow, we've already appeared. Andy and I are appearing tomorrow morning. I'm after Andy on the Big Dog Sports Radio show, so I'll probably recap that as well. But it's just great. The energy in Blacksburg, man, is just different. And the great thing is they're winning, or at least they won last year. Because I always say you could be great and personable, but you got to win. But what were your thoughts on the spring weekend, Andy, and what you saw as far as energy and just your evaluation?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. I think the big part there is the winning. They were doing all this stuff in 2022 as well. I don't think it was all, shiny, happy people in Blacksburg at that point. When you're 3-8, you have a 7-game losing streak and all this stuff. And, fortunate to even get to 3-8, honestly, beating Liberty in that what ended up being the last game there. But you get a quarterback in there that has a really high ceiling in Kyron Drones. You start running the ball a little bit, some playmakers on offense, defense is starting to turn a corner. You're winning some games. You're having some exciting performances. I mean, I've said this for a long time. Winning is a solve on everything. I mean, you put it out there, and even the minor things don't seem so major when you're out there and you're winning the game. So I think the winning helps, but I do think you look at sort of the culture that Pry has here. He's a very optimistic guy. He's really welcome back, former alumni. He really does. He's a head coach that seems to enjoy the shaking hands and the kissing babies part of it. I mean, he's a politician out there. I think that's something that it's not. I don't think I know that's something that Justin Fuente never enjoyed. That was an aspect of the program that it was painstaking to him. It just wasn't in his personality, and that's not. I'm not sitting here trying to rip him for that. I'm just saying that's sort of, what his personality was. And you compare that to Pride. Pride is very outgoing. He enjoys being the center of attention. He can put on a show. He's very charming when he talks to you one-on-one. I mean, he's got that knack to make you feel like you're a very important person, even when you're not. And I say this as a media member, knowing I'm not an important person, and he still makes you feel like that when you're talking to him. So, I think he's got that part of the job down. And, honestly, that's a big part of the job these days. You got to be the CEO. You've got to sell your program. You got to sell the vision. And of course you have to do the on-field stuff as well. But I mean, so much of recruiting is that sales pitch, and, being in the room with moms and dads and relatives and laying out this vision that guys will come. And there's got to be a little bit of financial backing behind it now these days. But you have to have that other part too, to get their foot in the door, to be able to talk about that second part.
Yeah. Yeah. Danny, do you have a question?
I mean, I remember meeting Pride for the first time the year I called the spring game in 2022, and I had the same experience. No one in there was that important, but Pride was very generous, very kind, just very easygoing, easy to talk to. But Andy, one of the things that we were talking about right before you jumped on, from an on-field standpoint, what we saw in the spring game, at least from what I saw, we had to give some props to PJ Prelo, one of our guy Pearson's sons, of course, getting into the end zone a couple of times. But I pointed out it seems like they're looking to be a little bit more creative with the way that they get those running backs the ball. Obviously, Tootin had a sensational year last season, and that was not limited to what he did running the football. He's a heck of an asset to have in the return game as well. So I'm curious as to what you saw from their strategy, from Tyler Bowen's standpoint, in what they're doing with the running backs this season.
It's always tough to draw too much from the spring game, because I think they try not to show too much intentionally in the spring game. They're not really going to run the ball like they normally do, just because I think that's one way to sort of avoid injuries, is not just run it up inside where bodies are banging the whole time. So I think that's why you see so much passing in the spring game.
Yeah,
you get out in spaces, and not as many people falling on knees and stuff like that. So that might be sort of a function of that. But that said, the running backs look pretty good catching the ball. And that wasn't an element that was really all that big last year in this offense. I mean, they ran it with drones. They threw it to the receivers. If you throw it to the running backs too, I mean, if you can diversify the offense like that, it just feels like there's so many weapons all over the field. And it feels like this is as deep of a skill group as they've had maybe since I've been covering the team. I don't know. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself.
Wow.
I mean, they've had some really good guys. They just weren't necessarily deep in the past with how many guys they would go to. I think they just have a really deep, group of guys, and trying to be creative and getting them the ball, whether that's running back passes or reverses to guys like Takai Heath and Xavier Turner Bradshaw, who seem to really excel in that sort of situation. Then you got a couple receivers that didn't even play a whole lot in that spring game. That opens up opportunities for other people. So I think it just sort of speaks to the depth of talent they have skill wise on this team. That you compare it to 2 years ago when they had Caleb Smith as their top receiver, and
I
then
just talked about this.
pray to whoever else you throw it to out there. I mean, there's just
Right.
nobody else out there. Jalen Holston was probably considered the starting running back. I think he'd probably be the fourth guy on this roster right now. So just they've really done a good job of upgrading the roster in that sense. And not only top end talent, but depth of talent as well.
Yeah, when you're right, Andy, because you talk about the depth of the talent and offensive skill set. As soon as you said it, I thought back to 2010 when Virginia Tech won the ACC in 2010, and then the following year they won the Coastal Division. They were going for a repeat in 2011 after losing Tyrod with Logan. But that's the year Clemson took over the ACC. I was there front and center in person when Clemson beat us like a drum all night. I heard CLE. They just spelled Clemson out the entire time. But to your point, I remember the 2010 team had a plethora of receivers. Obviously, you had Tyrod, you had David Wilson, and then you also had Ryan. Was Ryan on that team? Danny? Darren Evans, I know, was on that team.
I think Darren Evans and Ryan
Darren
Williams
Evans,
weren't
yeah,
all three of them
Darren
on that
Evans,
team.
yeah, Darren Evans, Ryan Williams, and David Wilson. If you think about that, and you
Yeah,
had those receivers and Danny
Cole
Cole and Jared
Boykin,
Boykin.
Tyrell Roberts.
I know I don't want to get ahead, but I mean that because that Tech defense wasn't stellar that year. They only beat Florida State in the ACC championship 44-33 or something like that. I don't have in front of me. But with that being said, and we haven't touched on the defense yet, and we'll go into in a second. But when you look at the schedule and you look again, it's April. So everyone listening, when we post this, we understand it's April. When you look at the schedule and you look at the team, how it's coming together, the culture, the energy, the leadership, um, how good could this offense be? And in the ACC, given its criticism, you have seen some really powerful offenses in recent years with Lamar Jackson. You even Carolina when they had May, who Danny's team may take in the first round. um, but how explosive can this be? Do you feel like Tyler Bowen is kind of finding himself as an OC and with the offense and what they can do?
Yeah, I think so. And you saw some of that last year where they really, figured out all of Drone's strengths. They figured out ways to run the ball where, maybe the offensive line wasn't as far along as some of the other position groups, but they ran it with misdirection and, involving the quarterback and running different ways. And I mean, shoot, they had 300-yard rushing games. That's tough to do, even though I don't think the offensive line was great necessarily.
Yeah.
And you look at some of the Pro Football Focus grades, and I know take those with a grain of salt, but there's a reason why they went into the portal for Montavious Cunningham. And honestly, if they could grab another offensive lineman right now, I bet you they probably would. I don't know if they will. They're tough to find in the portal, especially at this stage. But I think they're starting to find themselves. I think, I do the Athlon thing, the Athlon preview for Virginia Tech, and they sent out an email the other day, and they're like, well, what are some suggestions for all conference teams? They sort of like to get beat writers' opinion of where you put some of these guys. And I start going through the offense. I'm like, I'd consider Kyron Drones for first team All ACC. I considered Bashal Tootin for first team All ACC. I'd consider Ali Jennings for first team All ACC. I'd probably put Felton up there in that second team, first team. Maybe he really came on strong down the stretch there. Jalen Lane's pretty solid guy. Maybe could get up to third or second team, something like that. And this is a deep group of playmakers with perhaps some of the best skill guys in the ACC. We'll see how it plays out. but I think they're in the conversation for those spots. And when you have that, you go, well, that's a talented group. And if they can figure out how to play to the strengths of these talents, they could hit a ceiling that's, hasn't been seen here in a while in terms of production.
Yeah.
So, I think it comes down to offensive line and how that group comes together and gels. And, can they hold up against some of the more elite defenses they go against? Because, you saw last year, Louisville whooped them up front.
Woo!
NC State whooped them up front for a good part of that game. Florida State, was problematic. I don't think Florida State's defense was as good as some of those other ones, but you can beat the 6-6, the 7-6 teams, the middle of the pack ACC. Can you beat that top tier group? I think you're going to need to see the offensive line take a step forward to really be able to, be in that mix.
No doubt.
I think that's probably like the biggest question going into this season, guys, is can Virginia Tech take that next step from being the 7-6 team to getting to the top tier teams that are in this conference? Because they hung tough with NC State towards the end of that game and Florida State, but they like Andy was talking about, they got beat pretty good by Louisville. That game was never close at any point. So
you say Florida State, NC State. I mean, NC State was up by 20 some at some point. Florida State was.
I know they had to come back.
20. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's like it's one thing to come back when you're down by 20. I think those teams kind of take the foot off the
Florida
Totally
State game
true.
was interesting. The Florida State game, Andy's right, but that was interesting because they came back and they were driving, and it would have been it was a one possession game. They were up 8, and I believe Drones got sacked, and then of course that was just, even if we had tied it, it just was clear that game, to Andy's point, that Florida State was in a different league as far as athletes and defense and offensive line, because you could just see the depth. But I get what you're saying, because at least they fought back. I think in that 3-8 season, and even the season before with the last few years of Fuente, it was over. They quit.
Yeah, they would have just gotten boat raced, and 2 of those games were on the road, and all 3 of those teams were ranked when they played them. It's not like Tech would have been favored to win any of those games. It would have been at least a decent upset had they been able to pull those up. But Andy's right, because they did have to. They squeaked into the end of that NC State game to make it close. So they got beat pretty soundly all game. But and we're looking a little bit far ahead here at this point, if I make this point, but getting out to a quick start this season relative to last season where you're 2-4 out of the gate seems like it could really get the momentum rolling for this team as they get into the meat of an ACC schedule that'll be a little bit tougher, I think, this year.
Yeah, I've said anything less than 4-0 in the non-conference portion, I think, will be a disappointment.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be favored in all those games. That doesn't necessarily mean you go 4-0. I know how percentages work in these games, and you're maybe a 60% favorite to win some of these. But ODU should be favored. Rutgers at home should be favored in that one. Marshall at home should be favored in that one. Vanderbilt on the road in the opener. If you're choosing a road game to play in the Power 4, it's Vanderbilt. Right? That's not a good team in the SEC. It's not like you're going to play Alabama or something like that, or a neutral site. I mean, you should win that game. Now, it's been a while since they've gotten through the non-conference undefeated. I think you might have to go back the late aughts. I don't think it's happened since I've been here. They've always slipped up in one of those games early in the season. So that's tough to do. And then you get to the ACC schedule and you miss Florida State. You miss NC State. You miss Louisville this year. Don't play North Carolina. I mean, that's pretty beneficial. That said, still host Clemson, still go to Miami. There's still some tricky games on there. I bring this up all the time, and Dwight will understand this.
I do.
Beware the Carrier Dome, man.
Oh my God, we go there this year.
Yes.
We go there this year.
Yes.
I just posted a video of Brandon Simonis playing up there. Goodness gracious.
I say that, and people are like, oh, Syracuse, they're terrible. They got a new coach.
No.
I'm like, better teams than this Virginia Tech team have gone up there and played worse Syracuse teams and lost. It had I realize that's the past. It happens all the time. Unranked Syracuse teams beating ranked Virginia Tech teams. I mean, even the one that Virginia Tech won up there, it needed like a late Michael Vick run, I think, to put the game away. A late one. There have been some heartbreaking losses up there, and some pretty good teams that have stumbled in that dome. There's something about it. And I'm going to keep calling it the Carrier Dome. I don't know It's like JMA Wireless
Oh,
Dome.
yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Screw
Oh,
that.
what is it
Screw that.
called?
It's the JMA Wireless Dome. I think it is
Yo,
the
what is it?
Right.
Look, Danny. It's not the. Where am I been? It's not the
No,
Carrier
Andy's
Dome.
right. It's they changed it up. They
They
changed it
change a
up on
new
us. But
sponsor. But
it's
yeah, it's
forever
always
the
the Carrier
Carrier
Dome to
Dome.
me. But it's like it's stuff like that. It's like beware of that. Beware of going to Miami one week and having to go Stanford the next cross country. And people go, oh,
Oh, that's tough.
Stanford's not a good
Uh,
team. It's like, okay,
mm-mm.
well, you have your two longest trips back to back. You have to
Hmm.
go, 3 hour or three time zones to the west to play a brand new team. Like, I'm just saying these are the tests that you're going to have to see this year with this team and see, can they handle it? Because they proved they can beat these other teams. Can they handle these difficult situations? Can they beat the top tier teams in the ACC? I think these are the questions that need to be answered. Still, I like this team's ceiling. I think they're certainly a dark horse in the ACC, and honestly, even a little bit of dark horse playoff contention
No, they
if
are.
things come together. With the
Yeah.
12-team playoff now, but you have to show me you can beat the top tier competition. You have to show me you can, handle some of the challenges in front of you. Something as simple as going up to Syracuse and winning in a place that historically has been pretty tough.
Listen, dude, as you're talking, I'm actually visualizing and reflecting. I remember that run with Mike. I was living in Fairfax. I didn't even have kids yet. I was only a few years removed from Tech. I might have been a year removed from Tech. And I remember that was when Mike was still up for the Heisman. It was his last year at Tech. And that run, the game was crazy because he got stacked 6 or 7 times by Dwight Freeney, right? He got
Yeah.
sacked 6 or 7 times, and on top of it, Syracuse is really loaded. They had a really good team that year. But it took everything by the defense, Willie Powell at safety and those guys to make plays to get Mike the ball back. That was a tough win. And, excuse me, the Dome, that's just a place of horrors, man. I didn't even know we played there this year. I didn't know that. I know they came to Blacksburg last year and we destroyed them. That's gonna be a tough game because even though like people like you say, Eddie, Twitter and fans in general, oh, these kids don't know anything about it. You got to break that curve. You got to just y'all have no idea. My senior year, I'm that old man right now. If we win the game, we go to the Orange Bowl and we play Florida. We go to the Orange Bowl and we play Florida. And back then, the Alliance Bowls. It was before the BCS Bowls, but it was still a big bowl. And we led the entire game. And Bud Foster, shout out to my guy Bud. I've been seeing Bud twice over the last 3 weeks. And he called a timeout and told the defense that McNabb was going to run that play.
The
They
throwback.
ran the throwback. He told them. If you remember, that was the game late in the game. Danny, I don't even know if you were in elementary school yet. But McNabb was dry heaving and throwing up, and we called a timeout. Corey Moore had just sacked him for like an 8-yard loss. And then you have the 96 team with Druckenmiller. They went 10-1. We went 10-1 that year. Our only one loss was at Syracuse. And they beat us 52-21. So that's a place. And then of course Fuente had a big they were having a great season that year, ranked 13th in the country, went up there and we got smoked. I think we were favored by almost 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was like 20,
Yeah, that's
22,
the one I
24
remember.
points. And,
Yeah.
Right.
here's another thing to consider about that game. November 2nd at Syracuse, November 9th at home against Clemson. Like, Syracuse is the definition of a trap game in this one. You're looking ahead. You've got
Oh,
this huge, like, man, you're flying high during the season. You've got Clemson coming in. It's all there in front of you. And you forget that you have to go up there to the Carrier Dome, JMA Wireless Dome, and play against this team. I'm saying right now, whenever I say it, people roll their eyes and they go, oh, Syracuse, that's a win. I'm like, do not put that in the win column quite yet.
Well, you know
he's
what?
planting that seed now.
I'm with it. I'm riding the Andy train when it comes to preparing our fan base because right now it's all good. But one close win or unexpected loss, you know how that goes. That's just every fan base, to be honest with you. But what I think is going to be the key to this season, we all know about the weapons, Andy, on offense, and it's well documented. Every time you look on Twitter, there's a flyer with Kyron Drones being this and Heisman candidate and all the receivers and Tootin, all this, everybody came back. The truth of the matter is that Tech still has to win on defense. They got 3 great defensive tackles in the transfers. The kid from Duke, the kid from Oklahoma, who's a Highland Springs kid, And they also got that JUCO transfer who squatted. J.C. Price told me like almost 700 pounds.
Yeah. Kamari
Yeah,
Copeland.
like
He's
yeah,
impressive.
he's impressive. I've seen him up person with all four of my eyes. He's a cyborg. He's a cyborg. He's special. But at the same time, I mean, the secondary was the strength of Tech last year. So to me, the defense has to step up, or at least build on what they did last year for Tech to meet or exceed expectations. Because I think no matter what, lunch pail is a definition of Virginia Tech football. We're in a different age now. You're not going to hold people like those teams from the 90s and 2000s to, so many yards because of the spread offenses. But I think Tech's defense has to still be the forefront of the team, along with the offense being complementary and making plays. But that's my opinion. I'm just basing off what I know. But Andy, I mean, what are your thoughts about the defense? What are the strengths? What are the concerns and questions mark? Not just based on the spring game, but just heading into this fall with the
Yeah,
defense and who they got coming back.
I feel pretty comfortable about that defensive line and the cornerbacks, obviously. And when you get Strong and Delane back, that might be the best tandem in the ACC. Possibly maybe in some national conversations. But the season Dorian Strong had last year, it's so just like overlooked for some reason. Like how that guy didn't get first team all ACC is ridiculous to me. I mean, every time they threw to him, it was probably better if they threw it into the ground than throwing it at him. That's how effective he was in coverage last season. Then Delane coming back, he was the spring MVP, or most improved player on defense. And I think that's, a really solid 1-2 punch. Defensive line, those tackles were solid last year, and Feldarius Payne really came on down the stretch, and the other two played a whole lot of football. I think these tackles they brought in might have better playmaking abilities. Peebles with what he did at Duke, and you see the skills Copeland has in terms of an athletic guy. You pair that with Antoine Powell-Ryland, Cole Nelson on the edge. Keyshawn Burgos looked pretty good
Yes, he
in the
did.
spring game. I feel like that defensive line as a group is going to get after the quarterback and make some plays. My biggest concern is those linebackers and the safeties. And you saw it last year with some of the run fits. And I mean, it was horrendous earlier in the season where every time somebody handed off, it's like, well, there's another 60-yard touchdown run. There they go. Kelly Lawson was hurt in the spring, so you didn't see him do anything. Sam Brumfield's here, and I think they like him filling that Mike spot. But there's just, not a ton of guys in the linebacker group that you feel comfortable with after last year. I know Jaden Keller, they've talked about leaps and bounds, how he's improved. I'm going to have to see it on the field before I buy into it, like the last 2 years when they basically said the same thing. And then you look at safeties. I mean, Jalen Stroma was hurt all spring, so you didn't see him. I think they like him.
Yeah,
Still think they would have liked him to get some work out there. And then beyond that, Jalen Jones had his struggles in his first year last year. Mose Phillips had some growing pains as a true freshman. Now those guys ready to step up into a leadership role and a starting role and shore up the middle of that defense. Because he can be really good on the corners, he can be really good up front. But if somebody breaks that first line and you just have this soft middle of your defense, we saw what happened to it last year, and it's tough to win football games when the running back's hitting his head on the goalpost, running 80 yards for a touchdown. So. That'll be key how that group comes together. If Brumfield's really the guy at Mike, if they can find a couple safeties, if they can settle that linebacker rotation. I would think linebackers, you would feel comfortable about that with Pry and Marv and Sean Quinn. I mean, that's all those guys' specialty. That's what they have coached all their entire lives. I think they would have a good handle on the linebacker room. Safety, I think those guys have to grow up real quick this year.
Yeah, I like Go ahead, Danny. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say I Kelly Lawson's one guy you mentioned, Andy, that's kind of missed some time this spring because he's been hurt, and I saw a lot of flashes of him last year where I thought he looked like he could be an elite linebacker, very athletic, very raw though, right? Still has a lot of development to still do. It certainly helps though to have a defensive line like the Hokies do have up front, especially with it seemingly having gotten stronger, adding Peebles and Copeland. I mean, Peebles winning an award this offseason has to spell good news for the Hokies, in addition to, as we've both mentioned in this podcast so far, what he did at Duke. I mean, he seems like he's going to be a perfect fit on this defense.
He didn't even start at Duke, and he was all ACC.
I wanted to say the same thing. He didn't.
Every now and then a player comes along where when you talk to coaches about him, like the excitement that they have is palpable. Like it's like they can almost not contain themselves talking about him. And I think you talk to Pry and you talk to JC Price, and it's just like, holy crap, this guy was in the portal and we got him. Like they just sort of like, I think, still stunned that it just happened so easily that he came to them. They had this weird connection with Derek Jones in Duke, and one of the guys that originally, gave him an opportunity in college. And I think his wife's hairdresser was Peebles' mom or something. I forget exactly what the connection was there, but I mean,
Mm.
you talk to these guys and it's like, he's really good. He's really, really good.
Yep.
And the fact that he goes through the spring and he's the defensive spring MVP, it's like, okay, well, he's good and he's a hard worker. And he seems like a
Right.
pretty humble guy. He didn't come in here with a big head. It's like, okay, I'm going to start here and this other ACC program. I mean, he came in and he really earned everybody's respect. So you have to admire that. So that's one of those guys where, I'm trying to think of people in the past. It's like when James Mitchell was just first breaking out and you talk to Fuente and
Mm.
other coaches and you're like, man, they just really like this. They cannot almost contain what they're saying about this guy. Isaiah Ford, I think, was like that when he first
Isaiah
got here.
Ford.
Mm.
Yep.
There's just a lot of guys that, coaches know they have one. And I think they know they have one with Peebles.
Yeah, that was a huge pickup. I'll say this. The one thing, and Bill Roth and I talked about this when I saw him in Blacksburg, and this has come up amongst the fan base, is that last season, one glaring thing that I enjoyed and a lot of fans enjoyed and was great to see was that Lane Stadium actually matched the hype of the entrance. They played well at home, minus the NC State game and the Purdue game. The Purdue game was weird because
Mm.
they probably should have just canceled that game, but they had like a 5 hour layoff. And they looked like they were going to win that game early on. And that was the game when drones came in and got the burn late. But overall, I mean, those Thursday night games, they look great. It looked like kind of like the Tech of old, so to speak. But we all know when you cover football, your championship conference, division, or even bigger championship teams play well on the road. And my theme for Tech this year, at least my vision for them in regards to being a better team than what they were last year to build on what they did is they have to learn how to handle success and they have to be mental tough. So to me, when I look at the defense, I think the defense with the lunch pill mentality being brought back and given what Tech is all about, they're going to have to be tougher on the road. They're going to have to show they look great against a 7-win Boston College team last year. They blew them out. They jumped on them, onside kicks, fake punts. They opened it up. They played with a sense of urgency. But at the same time, um, Andy, this question is this right here. When you look at Virginia Tech and Pride, he's only in his third year. Me and Danny were tripping off that. He's only in his third year, and expectations are crazy. But that's the day and time we live in with college sports. What again? This is April, but what you think could be if it happens? His signature win. Like every coach, for me, when people talk about Beamer, and you and I were both featured on the Beamer documentary that was on ACC Network and ESPN. You and I both, along with Mike, Brandon Flowers, and they got so much footage of me, but only put like in 15 minutes. But they asked me, they didn't show it, but I get asked this all the question was, what was his signature win? And many people say the Sugar Bowl of 95 or, this game, this game. I always go back to beating Miami for the first time. We were 0-2, and you beat Miami for the first time. That propelled us to winning 10 straight and finishing in the top 10 and beating Texas in the Sugar Bowl. And then, of course, your Kevin Jones and your Tyrod Taylors and guys like that come into Blacksburg. Looking at the schedule right now, and again, this is just all for the sake of running our podcast right now. Is there a signature win possibly that he could have? You played Miami on the road. I don't ever fall into the Miami hype, ever. So Miami is good on paper because it's the U, but they have not done anything in the last 15 years. Um, but is there a signature win possibly? Just kind of doing our crystal ball thing right now.
I mean, I think it's definitely Clemson at home.
Mm.
Has to be.
That was the program that, I know Florida State has been pretty good at different
Mm-hmm.
times in the last, 15 years here, but Clemson was the program that took the baton from Virginia Tech around, in that 2011 season. And the two
Mm-hmm.
programs kind of went in different directions there
Yep.
for a while. And, you're talking about Clemson being one of the elites and winning national championships and Virginia Tech struggling to get to 500 most of the
Mm-hmm.
time. If you can get back to beating a team like that, that puts you in the conversation. I know Clemson has slipped a little bit in recent years. I think they still did pretty well, 9 or 10 wins last year still, I think, what they finished up with. They're still up there at the top of the ACC. And, you don't get Florida State this year. You mentioned Miami. It's such a hit or miss team. Every year I did this reminder. I tweeted one time when Miami got shut out in like the Independence Bowl or by Louisiana Tech or something like that. I'm like, dear Andy Banner, VT, do not choose Miami to win the Coastal Division, regardless of what happens in the offseason, because they always get hyped up. And every year somebody will send that tweet back to me before the ACC kickoff, reminding me not to pick Miami.
I'm probably one of them, man. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
man, you, David Till, Chris Coleman, y'all, I don't get it.
when people are going to get
suspects.
talked into it again, and already you're looking at it and you go, yeah, Cam Ward and the offensive defensive lines those teams have, and you just need to remind yourself that Mario Cristobal is the coach, the guy that didn't know how to take a knee at the end of a game to win it last year.
Georgia Tech.
That's the horse you're backing, the coach that doesn't know how to take a knee at the end of the game. So, if they beat Miami early in the year, I'm not going to say it's not a really good win, especially if you go on the road to do it. I'm just saying, that's not the destination. Clemson has been there in the ACC championship game. I don't even know how many times in the last 14 years, a lot, almost an annual appearance in that thing. So if you beat something like that as the end of the year and, Duke and Virginia after that, I think 2 very gettable games then, I think you could be playing for something special. And that's what you want at Tech. You want to be playing for something special. Playing for bowl eligibility is not something special. That's the minimum requirement at Virginia Tech to keep the fan base satisfied. Playing for something special is possibly getting to Charlotte, getting there at the end of the year, playing for something after that Virginia game before you get to the bowl game. It's been a while since that's been a regular occurrence here. But I think if you beat Clemson, that's on the table, provided you handle Syracuse the week before Clemson. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, look, real quick, Danny, and I know you want to ask Andy his last question and then we'll let him go. But when you look at Clemson, I must have missed this situation, but I always see, and again, it's Twitter. So I preface everybody, that statement for everybody listening and watching. But I keep hearing this stuff about Dabo doesn't want to use the portal. He doesn't want to use the portal. That's what you get. You're anti-portal. You're anti-NIL. You're in the media, okay? So you're around this stuff. Is there validity to that? Does he not like the portal and NIL? Because to me, to your point, they're still winning. They're still winning 9 to 10 games. I mean, I never took that for granted. And when it left Virginia Tech, I really missed winning 10 games or more. But I keep hearing that. I know I've read the NIL comments, but I didn't think Clemson. I don't know. Is he anti-portal? Have you seen that, guys? Have y'all seen that?
Yeah, he has not used it a lot.
Okay.
I think they added like a kicker and a backup quarterback one time. That is typically not how they address their team needs. They do it through high school recruiting and development, and that's somewhat admirable in this day and age to say these are the guys we recruited. We're going to develop them over time, and we're not going to go out shopping for quick fits like that. I think the part where Dabo loses me is, the NIL is when they start paying players, that's the day I need to retire and go to the league. First of all, you're a $10 million a year coach. So I don't want to hear it from you, about money in this supposed amateur endeavor that you guys are on here. And secondly, believe me, IPTE and that Clemson fundraising arm is playing plenty of money for NIL for those Clemson players. They are not going hungry with the type of cash that they're throwing that way. So I think that is a pretty well-compensated roster. I don't think you can have a non-well-compensated roster and be competitive in this day and age. So it kind of seems disingenuous to me. It's like, well, NIL's been around for a couple of years and you're still coaching. So it obviously doesn't bother you that much. You found a way to adapt to that. But I think that Clemson could help itself if it, started. It's probably good for the other schools that they don't try to address things through the portal, because you mean to tell me there's not a draft or a signing class that just doesn't quite hit the way you think it does at a couple positions, and guys still leave Clemson. All of a sudden you're a little shorthanded at certain positions. I think that catches up to you for a while. And I think what maybe might be catching up to them more is losing somebody like Brent Venables. And how long
Yes.
how long can that defense continue, being good? I know they got really good talent in those trenches, but I mean, shoot, they haven't looked the same. Since Venables left, defensively not quite as good.
And two
Offense.
legendary quarterbacks.
Yeah, offensively, you're talking about like two all timers in Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, and
Yeah.
frankly, I don't
Hmm.
think Cade Klubnik is the dude there. He's the guy they're going to roll with. I don't know. He's not on the level of those previous two guys, and when you don't have that, all of a sudden that's a lot more on that defense. So I'm not saying Clemson's like an easy win or anything like that. I think it could be competitive though, especially with them coming into Lane Stadium this year. I think that's a team that is gettable, just based on sort of the trajectory of the two programs.
Well, the fans will
Yeah.
show up. The fans will show up. That's one thing about Hokie Nation. Despite this rough patch and the transition between Fuente and Pride and even Beamer the last 4 years when we were 7-6, 7-6, 8-6, or 8-5, 7-6, fans always showed up. So
Yeah.
they'll be ready when we play Clemson. But go ahead, Danny. I'm sorry. That's
Well,
funny.
and where that Clemson game is situated on the schedule being the late half of the season, early November, right? It really seems like it would be setting up what could be maybe not a de facto ACC championship game, but it could be a matchup of two of the better teams in the conference if each of these teams plays up to their potential. It's interesting too, just the state that college football is in this year. Like we have to make adjustments as guys that just talk about it, right? Andy already said Power Four, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's right. We're down to
Yeah.
we're down to
Power
four
four.
conferences now.
I
That's
forgot
totally
too.
true, right?" And I
Yeah.
know guys, I think guys have soured on Dabo a little bit for some of the comments that he's made around NIL and whatnot, but they've still got plenty of talent on that roster. They're going to get up for a game to come to Blacksburg. Even when Virginia Tech has been down before, I mean, and obviously they're still not back to the point where they were winning 10 games for 10 years, but there was still something of wanting to go and beat Virginia Tech at Lane Stadium and, watching the Hokies run out to enter Sandman and then going and smacking them around all game long. Like that happened many times before this past season. So
We
I'm
we talk
just,
about we talk about Clemson's down. Here's Clemson the last 4 years: 10-3,
I
11-3, 9-4. They've won 30 games the last 3 years.
yeah,
Everybody in the ACC other than Florida State would kill to be down for that much over 3 years. Now it's not winning national championships all the time, and two of those they didn't even play for the ACC championship last year. 9-4, 4-4 in the ACC. So that is down technically from where they were, but they were on Mount Everest for a while there. Everything is going to be down relative to that. It's still a
bingo.
pretty strong program though.
Damn right.
You
I
know, you
mean,
know who another. I was going to say, who another team that I think it's a good thing that Virginia Tech is ducking this year is Pitt. I mean, Pitt isn't necessarily a team that I think scares you, but that's just another one of those teams coached by Narduzzi that the Hokies just seem to a lot of the times have a lot of problems with. I mean,
Up there.
and
up
Up
there.
there,
yeah,
they
up
do.
there, up
I
there.
think last season you look at that game, and I'm like, oh man, Pitt, just physical mindset. I think they'll beat him up, and I think I didn't quite take into account when I was predicting who was going to win that game, just the quarterback situation Pitt's in. I don't know if they've solved that yet, but that was such a mess last year with Dracovic and then other guys. I mean, it was a bad situation. They had nobody to play quarterback. You look at the difference between that team and the one with Kenny Pickett a couple years ago. There's another guy that just went in the portal from Pitt. That's like, hey, we're rebuilding. I don't want to be part of
Well,
this rebuilding
Narduzzi,
process.
Narduzzi's got to be careful because I interviewed him a few years ago. He is a great interview and he's passionate and he's spitting all over the mic and he's passionate and talking. But at the same time, I have a 17-year-old son who's being recruited and I'm around these kids all the time. I was just in Blacksburg. That brand of football can work if you got a great quarterback like Pickett or a dynamic skill set or some DBs, but that blue collar football can only last for so much. I mean, it's I hate saying that because I love that kind of football, but if you look at it, man, Pitt is a team that they can beat you up, but at the same time, even you going back to that goal line stand Tech had, which was legendary that year with Greg Stroman and Tim and Reggie Floyd and those guys. If you remember, they broke down that long run and Reggie Floyd tackled them and we ended
He
up
chased him
getting the
down.
goal.
Yeah.
He chased them down, right? But I always remember looking back, and Narduzzi was unapologetic after the game. He was like, "We can't get 2 yards," and he didn't call a timeout. They just ran 4 plays. And Bud was like, "We're gonna play it out." And kudos to those Tech players that had that goal line stand. That was a big win. It was senior day too. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember I remember thinking, man, call a timeout. Like, you're on the 2 yard line. But that's Narduzzi. He's gonna do it his way. Like even that one year, I think only the second time Tech won at, or maybe the only time at Heinz Field, whatever it's called now, Ketchup Field, whatever. But when Bucky Hodges, Isaiah Ford, and Cam Phillips went crazy with Gerard
Yeah.
Evans, and he refused to get out man to man. He said, "We're not changing what we do."
Yeah.
And there was and Fuente said they're not going to get out of it, so we're going to keep taking these 50-50 ball shots.
And how
And
did it end? All three of those guys had 100-yard receiving games.
yes, he won't
And,
change.
and Narduzzi, instead of changing anything, he just spent the entire game yelling at the officials about, oh, they're
Yes,
pushing
Right.
off. It's like, well, they're not
yeah.
calling it, man. So maybe change some stuff up. I mean,
If
yeah,
he
some
won't
coaches get very
change.
stubborn about how they're doing stuff. It's like, this is how I do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we've coached to do it. And I will not adjust. And it's like, I think you have to have a little bit more adaptability than that.
Yeah,
Last year they were 3-9. I mean, that's rough. That's a pretty
that
big
is
drop
really
off
rough.
from,
Yeah,
winning the ACC a couple years ago.
yeah, man. But look, Andy, we're gonna leave you on, man. We get ready to do our legacy shout out, so I'm gonna give you time to think about it. Danny and I, this is a legacy podcast. Um, we do legacy shout out. So it could be any Virginia Tech player, it could be a media guy, media woman, it could be a professor, it could be a former player. We just want to shout out somebody that's affiliated with Virginia Tech. We honor their legacy. So in years past, or episodes past, excuse me, we've done Tarita Ratcliffe, we've done Dr. Vi, Professor, we've done Beamer, Foster, we've done a lot. So the Hokie legacy shout outs, or it just be somebody you want to shout out in general. It doesn't even have to be I said Virginia Tech, it can be somebody you just really want to shout out. Even somebody, you work with, or somebody retiring. But while you think about that, you and
Oh,
Danny,
I've
your
got
legacy.
somebody in mind already.
All
I'm
right,
ready to
okay.
roll.
Well, before we do that, real quick, and I'll let you go first. Um, when you look at Tech moving forward, man, and we talked a lot about the defense, the personnel, and pride, and we talk about their chances to win the ACC and whatnot. When you look at Virginia Tech and the landscape of college football, I don't really care for this whole conference realignment stuff. I can't keep up with it. I kind of just wait to see what's actually happened on Twitter versus the rumors on the message boards. But where do you see Virginia Tech? I was on one of your pods before, and I watch and read all your stuff. You and Chris Coleman and Will Stewart do a hell of a job covering Tech sports. Um, where are we at right now? Witz had some great hires. We just lost Kenny Brooks, and he hired a great hire. And of course, you got Fry, who so far has been a great addition. But financially, as far as the future of college, where's Virginia Tech at when it comes to financial stability and projecting them moving forward in the landscape of college sports?
I think better than a lot, but not quite as good as a couple dozen. That's where they are revenue wise, and that's probably where they're going to stay.
Mm,
Even if they were to get an invite to the SEC or the Big Ten, you look at the donations that some of these schools rake in year by year. There's just a massive gulf between Virginia Tech and a lot of these schools. That's not a slight on Virginia Tech. It's just sort of the history of the program and where some of these play. Texas is a fundraising steamroller. I mean, you look at the money that they
it's
pull in down
crazy.
there, the oil money down there in Texas and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we hear so much about the gap between TV contracts. Oh, the Big Ten, the SEC makes so much more money, but some of these schools, donations wise, create another gap there. Ticket sales, just in terms of size of the stadium and kind of alumni base, they can fill those things up with. I mean, it is tough to compete financially with a lot of those schools. So, I think Virginia Tech will always have to try to be a little bit smarter with how it hires. Maybe understand that it's not going to ever be able to pay top dollar for some of these coaches. And if they get good enough to command an offer somewhere else, you know what? Let them go somewhere else and find somebody else to fill that spot. I look at VCU basketball and how many coaches have left VCU basketball, and that program just keeps humming and
That's a
churning with
great
new
point.
coaches
Great
because they
point.
understand they can't pay those guys. Okay, Jeff
Yes.
Capel. Okay, Shaka Smart. Okay, Will
Yep.
Wade. You go on to bigger and better
Mike
things.
Rhodes.
We'll hire the next guy. And they seem to do pretty well. And they understand their place and what they can afford, what they are, the type of culture they have. So, I don't know how this realignment is going to finish. I think eventually there's going to be a super league. I think that, these
Oh
schools like
yeah.
Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and Georgia and Texas. I mean, they've realized that they don't need certain conferences to move forward and make money. At a certain point,
Hmm.
they're going to realize they don't need some of these schools that they're associated with. And I look at like, why are we, Minnesota and Purdue and, Rutgers and Maryland and the Mississippi schools,
Oh man.
Vanderbilt. And, why are you
Vandy.
subsidizing these other schools when you could just break off and have this super league? And if that happens, depends on how big, but it might be tough for Virginia Tech to even be in the conversation for that. So even if they get this ticket to, the golden ticket to one of the Power Two conferences, I don't feel like those two are going to be static for long. I think it's going to move on to something else beyond that. So there's always going to be financial challenges. It's how they handle it. And you've heard Whit Babcock say it all the time. It's not about having the most money, because if it was, Texas would win the national championship all the time. Now,
Every year. Yeah.
they might be competitive because they have that kind of money, but it doesn't mean they're going to win all the time. There's other ways that you could be smart about your hires, smart about your allocation of resources. Beamer and Bud Foster didn't win in the 90s because they had the biggest budget. They were smart about how they were recruited and the system they put those guys in. Now, there's a little more challenges now with, you
Yeah.
develop somebody and they go somewhere else because it's a bigger paycheck. Obviously,
And
that
they,
threat is
yeah.
out there, but
Hmm.
there's ways to be competitive where you're
Yeah.
not necessarily paying the most money.
And they were great at branding because they weren't thinking about branding, but they branded that lunch pail. And that just
Mm.
became iconic in college football. And they also came out with the website Beamer Ball, which became a
Mm.
term that is
Yeah.
still used now, not just at tech games, but throughout the country when something happens on special teams. So they came along at a great time with ESPN doing Thursday night college football. Tech
Yeah,
was,
they're cutting edge
they
with that stuff.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
they also
Mm.
jumped on board with Game Day. Game Day came to Tech more than any other school at the time, and their fans, it was a great match with Hokie Nation and Game Day. So it's good that Tech is kind of trending in the right direction right now, because I think at this next stage of college sports, it's all about not just your wins, but your branding, like,
Yeah.
TV revenue and all. I mean, I try to keep up with this stuff, but it's like getting another degree, man. It's just different, man. Real quick though, I want to correct Danny. I'm surprised you didn't catch it. Legacy shout outs can be anybody. It doesn't have to be Tech. I was thinking about Danny when we do the show with me, you, and Mike, the Vic 757
Oh
show.
right.
When we do Hokie
Yeah.
shout outs, this could be anybody. It could be a Michigan grad. We just want to do a legacy shout out. But Andy, you said you had somebody, man, you want to go?
Yeah, it does have a Virginia Tech connection. I'll shout out Dave Smith. And it's maybe not a name that casual fans recognize out there. He was the
Mm.
longtime sports information director at Virginia Tech. Went into the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame this week.
Yep.
First of all, just a great guy, very pleasant to deal with, and he was of an old school mindset for SIDs, where he was an advocate for the media. He went out there and he really pushed for, access, and he understood, when stories were good for a program and when to push that. And he was a guy that was never confrontational. I don't think I ever really saw him get angry at anything. He just sort of had that demeanor with him. He's a very nice guy, very pleasant to deal with. I think he really understood that job and was very good for Virginia Tech in the sense that, he got stories out there, nationally, that helped them get some publicity and things like that. And he understood that more publicity for the program like that was good for the program. That I think that helped with some of the branding stuff. So, very old school operator like that. He was the SID when I first started covering Virginia Tech, and I think he was there through. I think he retired the year before Beamer's last year. So
Okay.
I remember writing a story
Yeah,
with
he
him and kind
did.
of
He did.
reminiscing about some of the major moments at Virginia Tech. And man, he used to do it all back in the day, in like the '80s, and you're like keeping baseball scores, doing all sorts of other stuff. I mean, he's got a wealth of Virginia Tech stories, and I think he was very good for this program, and somebody that I don't think a lot of people necessarily know his story.
No, he I know him, but I don't know him. I just know him all the hard work he did behind the scenes. That's an outstanding shout out. And I think that's what makes Virginia Tech a special place is guys like that who have been able to sustain throughout the different changes and the growth of the university. My shout out is somebody that's been at Tech a long time. When you go back for the spring game, and this year I went back earlier than normal. I usually go down Saturday morning or Friday evening. This time I went down Thursday. Saw a lot of guys, man. Ace Custis and Anthony Midget came down, who's coaching with the Steelers. Got a chance to talk to my guy Tyrod. But the highlight of my weekend, there were so many of them, seeing Danny. But one was catching with Bruce Garnes. And anybody listening or watching right now understands Bruce has been at Virginia Tech since 1988. He worked alongside John Boleyn for a long time, and he was tight with Cornell, still tight with Cornell Brown. He didn't play at Tech, but if you want to ever I'm a great storyteller, but he knows everything about Tech and even recruits and players. I was hanging out with him at the Sons of Saturday um, after party, whatever, and it was a great night, and we just were talking, me, him, and a lot of former players were, in town. And Bruce was telling, now he's working with the basketball program alongside Mike Young, and you should hear him go, man. Like he has been at Tech a long time. And the thing about it is that we joked about it, but he probably was serious. He'll probably be at Virginia Tech 10 years from now, 15 years from now. There's a little, if you ever see me, I posted, or if you ever get to a Tech game, he's got a little son that's dancing all the time at games. He's a little brown skinned kid just out there with the hair. And Bruce is a great storyteller, man. So I mean, again, I saw so many great people: Bill Roth, Billy Height, but Bruce, man, is just a great guy, man. And he's been at Tech a long time. He was there during the 2-8-1 seasons. He's got some crazy stories about Beamer and Bud Foster and all those guys, man. But Danny, who you got, man?
Well, those are two good ones. I'm going to stay on the Virginia Tech theme here, but I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. All right. Now, one of the cooler moments of the spring game, I think, for the larger audience, right, for most of the people at Lane Stadium, was seeing the breaking news that Liz Kitley would, in fact, see her number be retired this fall. The number 33 will never be worn again in a Virginia Tech women's basketball uniform. And I think it's really cool. Obviously, it's very well deserved, the career that she had here, taking Tech to the Final Four, being a major part of that team. And I mean, goodness gracious, 3-time ACC Player of the Year. We could go down the accolades. She's got all the accolades that you could want to have your jersey retired and live in the rafters at Castle Coliseum forever. But it's also at an interesting time, obviously, because that program is in such transition. And I know it could not have been easy for her to get hurt in the UVA game right before the ACC tournament, and then miss the ACC tournament, miss a chance to take the team back to the Final Four by not being able to play in the NCAA tournament, and then having your coach and so many of your friends leave for a different school. Understandably so. Obviously, that's a situation that we could have a whole other conversation in a different episode about, but I just think she's shown a lot of class throughout her entire tenure, but particularly in the last couple of months, as it's been obviously a very odd end to her career. The only thing that I can compare it to, y'all, is what happened when the Nationals won the World Series in 2019, right? And they had the parade. Obviously, it was on the day that Tech lost to Notre Dame. I remember because I was at the parade and I was checking my phone trying to figure out what the score to that game was. But then COVID hit and there was no ring ceremony. There was no banner raising ceremony. There was nothing. It was like the World Series didn't even happen almost. And there was a similar feeling, I think, for a lot of Tech fans with Liz's career coming to an end so abruptly and so unfortunately. So to see her get her number retired is going to be awesome. That news is amazing, and she deserves all the kudos and the flowers and just a tip of the cap to her.
No, that's a great shout out, man. I mean, I met her 2 years ago in the Tech Triumph Suite, NIL Suite, man.
Nice.
And I mean, I was looking at her. I'm 6'4", 6'5". She's tall. She's a
Yeah.
phenomenal player, man. I hate, it's just that kind of stuff. Just that's the part about sports that sucks. I'm sure she's gonna bounce back, but you never know what could have happened because I'm sure the players kind of knew that was their last ride. Players kind of know before we know. But
Right.
that's a great shout out, man. Andy, we appreciate you jumping on, man. Always a pleasure, always dropping them gems. How can people support you before I sign off? How can people see what you got going on? Twitter handle, you with Techsideline, what you got coming up this summer, this season? Any features that you can
We're
talk
working
about
on
yet?
all that. I think we're trying to
Okay.
go to the ACC spring meetings this year.
Oh,
See how
cool.
that goes. But yeah, follow me on Andy Bitter VT on Twitter. Sign up for Techsideline. Yeah, support
Yes.
us. Support us there. Yeah, we got great stuff. Basketball, we got everything covered. We got somebody covering baseball,
Y'all cover
softball,
everything.
wrestling. We cover everything. You get my football coverage, David Cunningham, Chris Coleman, as well. I think if you sign up, there's a $20 off if you use my promo code Andy. So it's a good way to follow the Hokies. We're the site to do it.
Yeah, you
Come
are. I've
come
been I
subscribe to us. We'd love it.
look,
Yeah. Yeah.
y'all were the first ones. I know you kind of bounced around, but you being with them was just like signing a great free agent, man. Like Chris Coleman's my dude. He's on here. We done a show with both y'all on here. And
Mm.
you guys do a great job covering tech. And are you ever going to get in there with him and Will in the studio? Have you done that yet? When they do their pod, are you going to
Yeah, oh
jump in
yeah,
there with them?
I'm regular there on the podcast. Will
Okay.
has actually kind of stepped back a little bit because he's allowed to do like managerial stuff now that I'm there. Like
He's so big time now.
no, it's not big time. He's like, man, I got other people to do all this, editorial stuff and the writing. I can handle the business side of it. So
Oh
he's
yeah,
he's a
no,
mogul now. He's handling
no,
the
he's
tech
great.
Right.
sideline business. He's
No,
he's
I
keeping the
know.
lights on in that place.
Yeah, I'm just joking. He's a great dude. That's my guy, man. I mean, he's another one. I gotta get him on because he's got like Bruce Garns. He's got some stories. People don't realize, man. He's seen this thing grow, and he's pretty good at having a good feel for the game and what's going to happen. So,
I
anyway,
mean,
man, we
he would
appreciate you.
be he'd be great just to talk about like the start of Tech Sideline.
Yeah,
Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
that's what I'm
That's a
talking
good
about.
point.
this was like the Wild West of the internet back in the day when
Yeah.
he founded it. Was Hokie
Hmm.
Central is what it
Yes,
was
it
called,
was. Yes, it
and it
was.
became Tech Sideline. I mean, he that would actually be a pretty fascinating podcast just to hear the origins of that because he was out in the forefront of the message boards and everything that's so common now. Wasn't so
Yeah.
common in the mid '90s. That
No.
was I mean, and he's made a huge business out of it. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive. He did that little 20th or something catalog. I have it in my basement with my little man cave like Danny. He did it like a book with all the great stories and players and rivalry games. I have it. Yeah, Will's got I remember like when I was still trying to play football professionally, I remember I was Googling myself and the first thing that popped up was an article they did on me and my ranking. And when I signed with Tech, I was like, what is this? I didn't even know that was existed. And then like, you look back, man, they were on that. Back then it was just Tech Sideline, Tom Lemming, and the Roanoke Times and the Daily Press. That was it. And the Virginia Pilot.
Yeah.
But the Daily Press had David Till and Norm. Well, I don't even know if Norm was there yet. David Till's another guy that's been everywhere. You
Oh
look at
yeah,
some of those documentaries and stuff, this guy's covered everything,
he's
man.
the goat.
Mm.
It's
He's the
yeah,
Yeah.
goat.
he really is. He's in like 6 Hall of Fames. I mean, it's absurd. It's like, man,
I,
if I could get into one Hall of Fame, I'd be okay. You got like your rings on all 5 fingers about that thing.
you
It's
know
Yeah.
what
ridiculous.
you know what I appreciate. I'm gonna say this. I know I gotta sign off. I appreciate you, Andy, and David, and Will. And I'm gonna say this because I can say it. I don't give a damn. I really feel like everything now with ESPN and Fox Sports and Twitter Spaces, and I know I have a pod. I do this, but I think it's a different time now. It's all shock value. It's name calling,
Yep.
unprofessionalism. It's a lot of nonsense, speculation, shameless nicknames. You can be critical of Tech or UVA or Maryland or Michigan and call coaches out without making it personal. Like David Till, you and that whole crew, even my man Mike Barber, he's a good journalist, man. It's like you can do it in a way where you can say, "Hey, Tech needs to do this and get it done," or whatever. But it just seems like now the game has changed, where like they're not like how we just broke this down. Now, like we just we broke it down without getting like extra with it, and I just feel like it's just a different game now. It's like people have, I mean, anybody can get a microphone now and go to Best Buy and talk. And, I saw somebody post a podcast in one of those Hokie groups and I just clicked on it and it was on YouTube and it was some dude, probably an undergrad student, man. And I'm like, what are you? I couldn't even understand him. He was getting names wrong and it's just a different game, man. Will and them come from a different time. because but you guys have a little bit. I'm not doing this because you're on the show. I've said this behind your back. To even guys like Rick Watson, you guys do an ethical job and still can be analytical and break it down and talk about what needs to happen and be critical and still, you know, keep it interesting and keep it read worthy or listening worthy. So appreciate you, Andy, as always, man.
All right. Well, journalism, it's not dead yet, so that's good.
No,
That's right.
no, it's not. It's not. It's not. Contrary to what somebody may say, but everybody listening on Spotify, SoundCloud. Also, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, continue to share, subscribe, like. Also, support my guy Andy. Techsideline is a great, especially for those tech fans. Lock in. Their pod is great. They're the OGs of it. They're the first ones. And also cover all that stuff. Baseball, softball. Softball's having a great season. Baseball's doing well. Danny, I appreciate you. Andy, thank you so much. Like I say every episode, make sure you continue to support the Vicktory Life movement. And no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you have a positive impact. You live a great legacy. I'm host Dwight Vick, signing off with my guy, my other co-host, Danny Nokes and Andy Bitter of Techsideline. Thank you all.